Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace, coming at you late night on Tuesday, May 19th. We have a very special guest on the show today. We are going to bring on Sean Jones of the Sean Jones NBA show here in just a bit. You may remember him from previous podcast appearances on this feed. And we wanted to do a bit of a live reaction pod to game one of Knicks versus Cavs. And honestly, we thought that game was going to be a bit of a snooze fest. It was shaping out to be pretty boring. We're going back and forth with agenda items. And I was about to shoot him a message with like 8 minutes left in the game and be like, do we just want to rip this now? Like, is there really a point in waiting? Like, the Cavs are up 20. I know you're on the East Coast. And it's a good thing we waited because the Knicks came all the way back from down 22. Game goes to overtime, and the Knicks run away with it in OT. So we are going to talk about, of course, the Eastern Conference Finals, react to that game with Sean. We're also going to do a full breakdown of Game 1 of Spurs Thunder, which was an instant classic, and obviously a series that me and every other NBA fan out there has been waiting for a while. And then at the very end of the podcast, we do some NBA playoff awards as well. So it's a loaded podcast. Sean is a hero for staying up till well past midnight on the East Coast to record this with me. So hopefully you guys enjoy. So we are joined by Sean Jones of the Sean Jones NBA show, recording this right after the end of the overtime Knicks-Cavs finish, which ended up being a lot more exciting than we were expecting about halfway through that game. Sean, how we doing, man?
I'm good, Nick. Happy to be back on the show. I know it's been a bit. Had you on my pod earlier in the season, but excited to do a actual post-game react pod. I don't know if I've ever done like a night of after the game type situation, but yeah, we got a lot to talk about, obviously. I mean, last night's game gave us a lot to talk about. We thought today's game might have a little less, but back-to-back nights with overtime, it's hard to complain about that.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a risky business being an East Coaster trying to get into the post-game reaction shows. That'll put you in a logistics headache the next day. I dabbled a little bit. I did like a nice sad one after the Celtics got bounced, a little drunken sad one after Game 7 with my buddy. That just became a sloppy mess really quick. But at least we don't have any bias involved. We just have a couple of fun finals matchups to talk about. So let's get into it, man. Obviously, the headline, just to give a quick context for the audience that's parachuting in, the Knicks came back from, I believe, down 22 at one point, and I think the run at its height was like a 22-4 run or something along those lines throughout the fourth quarter, and it was a pretty insane comeback where it looked like the Cavs very much deserved to win and had the game in cruise control. The Knicks come back. Of course, by the time it gets to overtime, that the Knicks would be pretty heavy favorites at that point. They had the momentum. I think ESPN had to like mute the Garden because it was just so insane. Like, you could hear the sounds like cutting in and out a little bit because it was just so wild. But anyways, as we watched this ridiculous comeback, what's your biggest takeaway and just immediate slap reaction after watching that one unfold?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was the stark difference in the coaching situation between the two teams. I mean, we saw the Knicks, their offense looked genuinely discombobulated early in this game, and all the things that had been working for them just wasn't translating quite as well, just because of Cleveland's personnel is probably just a little more equipped to be able to handle some of the Karl-Anthony Towns above the key offensive hub type situation, with Mobley being kind of a wild card there. But they adjusted, not only in terms of what they were doing on the court. Obviously, James Harden, get him on a switch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a row down the stretch, but also from a lineup perspective. Josh Hart, don't know if this is going to be the series for him. He was a team worst -23, and you kind of felt it just because they were able to kind of just stick Jarrett Allen out there in the corner, let Mobley take Cat, and then Allen's kind of waiting because he can cheat off a Hart if guys do get to the basket. But then Mobley's also pretty capable of handling that Towns matchup. So I thought the switch to Shamet really made a difference. I mean, obviously he hit some huge shots, including the game tying shot, I believe, late in the fourth there, and then another one in overtime. Hart struggled. I think he made 1 3, but I think he had missed his first 4 or 5 or something like that before that. And then conversely, on the other side, Kenny Atkinson just kind of sat there and watched. You know, I did not see him make any sort of adjustment. In fact, I thought the offense got more stagnant and more ISO-centric as the game went on, and they kind of went away from the things that worked. Early in the game, it felt like they were targeting Brunson and Cat in the pick and roll, and that was really effective for them because they're basically playing 4-on-3 once they kind of beat that action. And they've got a lot of good decision makers on the team. You've got Allen and Mobley, who are both good out of the short roll. Harden, I mean, he made a career off of attacking mismatches and, finding the open guy. And then down the stretch, they just completely went away from it. And it was either ISO step back three, or they do one quick action and just immediately take the first shot that came to be. So that, on top of the fact that no timeout called during this entire run until I think it was the 18-1 run, and then they called it, but then the run continued and he just let the game kind of bleed and get away from them. So I thought Mike Brown just put on a coaching masterclass down the stretch of this, and Kenny Atkinson was, not the best.
Totally agree. And it was funny, thankfully this game was on ESPN, and to give ESPN some credit, that's still my favorite broadcast, especially when it's Mike Breen for the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. Obviously he's a regular season guy as well, and he's been doing this forever. He's the best in the business for a reason. But when he's picking up on still no timeout from Atkinson, and Atkinson still has 2 timeouts, it's he's saying that stuff during the game. It's yeah, guys, everybody's thinking it. If he's saying it, he's not one to criticize somebody. So that was a telltale sign. You could just feel the oxygen in that building. You could feel how tense both Mitchell and Harden were. I mean, I couldn't believe there's a lot of moments that stood out during the run, and I was actually having trouble wrapping my mind around just how quickly this was snowballing. And the official count, by the way, I was just looking this up. This is an extended run because it's most of fourth quarter and overtime, but it was technically from 7.5 minutes left in the game. It was a 44-11 Knicks run.
Jeez, yeah.
When you include overtime, obviously, and it was a double-digit win in overtime or whatever. But Harden never had it going, which, no surprise, another, James Harden playoff stinker here. But he had 6 turnovers. He was 1 of 8 from 3. Felt like all the shots late in the game. I've swung the ball late a couple times, and one of the threes was an air ball. I mean, there was nobody in the world that thought that shot was going to go in. And Donovan Mitchell actually deferred to him at the end of regulation, pretty obviously. And he actually had I think Harden had Bridges on him too. And if anything, Mitchell might have had the matchup advantage. What was going through your mind when Donovan Mitchell defers to James Harden in that situation? Were you as perplexed as I was watching that unfold?
To me, there wasn't one play where I was thinking it was crazy, because ultimately you can do the whole Mitchell should have had the last shot. The Sam Merrill shot, I think you're going to live with that. It was a good look. True. It was halfway down. But I think it's more just over the whole extended run. Mitchell felt so uninvolved. And it was honestly kind of bizarre, because he was having one of his most complete games of the postseason so far through the first half and really through the first 3 quarters. But the fourth quarter, I don't have the stat in front of me, but I would be interested to see even just how many shots he took, because I remember maybe 1 or 2, but again, they were all step backs. I think he airballed a floater at one point, and he took a step back 3, or the 2 off the top of my head I can remember. But it was all reverting back to kind of tunnel vision and just not really getting other guys involved. There was no actions, and that's the problem with this Cavs team, in my opinion, and why I've been non-committal on them as sort of a serious contender or anything like that, is just because that's when their back is against the wall. It kind of feels like they revert back to their bad habits of being an isolation heavy team. And we know that that's kind of been a little bit of the downfall of Harden teams in the past, but underratedly been a downfall of Mitchell teams in the past as well. And I know this is his first conference finals appearance, but Game 7 against Detroit was a very good distributing game for Mitchell, but in the first 6 games of that series, he averaged only 2.3 assists per game. And he didn't hit his season average in assists once this postseason outside of Game 7 of last series, and he had only 3 again tonight. And Harden also only had 3. So it is just I don't really understand why they just don't prioritize moving the ball, especially when they're trying to get a good look. And I think maybe if you're Atkinson, that's another reason why they should have called a timeout, is because maybe you can actually draw something up. But it kind of seems like he was a little shell shocked. So I don't know. I understand a little bit of Harden's built up a very strong reputation in the league, and so players respect him and whatnot. But again, it wasn't just one play where I'm why is he deferring to Harden? But the entire fourth quarter in overtime, I have no idea why he was so deferential across the board.
Totally. And to answer your question, he had 4 shots in the fourth quarter. He was 1 of 4. So you weren't too far off. And I just felt like that one play in particular, just because we had seen Harden turn the ball over a few times in that quarter. And again, he felt more off, where Mitchell to your point, I mean, before that, he had 3 points in the fourth quarter, meaning he had 26 points through 3 quarters. He was having a phenomenal game. He had 6 steals. It's just pretty puzzling. And you're right. I think the Atkinson thing, it felt a little reminiscent of my Celtics, the way it was like quite literally your turn, my turn, with Harden and with Mitchell kind of going back and forth there down the stretch. And honestly, I'm in some ways very relieved that the Knicks came back, because I would have had to do the thing, especially with us doing this reaction pod, where I'm like, do I now have to recalibrate my thoughts on this series and my thoughts about the Cavs? And I absolutely don't, because I was, to be honest with you, even if the Cavs had just run away with it from like it clearly looked like they were going to do through 3.5 quarters, I probably would have written this off as like a game one, misnomer, basically, and I would have felt pretty good about the Knicks. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I mean, what was your thoughts heading into the series on where how you thought this was going to shake out, and like how does game one kind of change that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Even when Cleveland was up 20, I was like, my pick initially was Knicks in 5. I thought it was going to be a little bit of a short series. I probably would have then said 6 instead of 5. However, I don't feel like it still would have been an overly competitive 6. I think Cleveland probably gets one at home. It's still at this point, and I would have felt that before. But yeah, game ones are fluky sometimes. We just saw it with like Minnesota and San Antonio in the last round. We've seen it with numerous series in the past. And so I was not going to take too much away from it, but I will say, I mean, there was some at least yellowish to reddish flags for the Knicks early in the game of stuff that was like kind of referring to some bad habits, and Karl-Anthony Towns looking like the head case that we've come to know him to be in the postseason, when he's been so phenomenal so far in this postseason. So between the awful fouls late, like that, if they did not make that comeback, I had flagged to play when Anunoby was driving to the basket. The Knicks were down 4, and they probably were going to be down 2 after that. And instead, Cat holds Jared Allen, and it goes the other way, and then the Cavs score on the next play. So it kind of looked like that could have been a decisive play. Obviously, doesn't matter in retrospect, but the fouls, the turnovers, he wasn't super efficient from the floor. And I also I know that Brunson was the catalyst for the comeback, but it sure was a lot of isolation, sure was a lot of Brunson. That's the kind of stuff that's got them a little bit in trouble in the past, in terms of just, it's not always sustainable over the span of 5, 6, 7 games in a series. Obviously, it is the reason they won this game. But I'm just saying that the Knicks, they were first in the NBA playoffs so far in terms of assists per game in this postseason. And what did they have in this game? I'll check real quick. They had 20 assists, which is 6 below what they had been averaging on the year. But again, some of those came in overtimes. It's boosts the stats a little bit. It wasn't as super high assist game for them across the board. Brunson also in his 2 highest field goal attempt games in this postseason. Those were the 2 games they lost to Atlanta. So there is correlation of when the other guys are more involved, he's shooting a little bit less. The usage is down. They tend to win more, which of course, some of that's just because that means the other guys are probably hitting shots. But regardless, there were some things for the Knicks that I was ready to come on here and be like, this is why they lost, and, bad habits reverting again. But, the Cavs had other ideas.
Totally. And I had actually flagged the same Towns play. It just felt like a massive momentum swing. You could hear the air being taken out of the Garden when he had that offensive foul, away from the ball. It was clearly a foul. It was his 4th foul of the game. 2 minutes left at overtime in that point. So couldn't agree more. And yeah, I think I was kind of doing the same exercise as you, digging through the box score, but it felt like I was watching the Knicks more so in the regular season rather than this team that has kind of become a juggernaut in the East. I want to I don't want to be gassing it. I know the East is a weaker field than the West, but the way that they closed out that series against Atlanta, the total dominance over Philly, that's not nothing. And I felt like early in this game, and I want to know if you agree, it felt like a little bit of awkwardness reasserting OG Anunoby, who was phenomenal before that hamstring injury. And he finished the game with 13 points looking at it now, but for the longest time, he had 3 points. He just really was not engaged. Looked like he kind of came alive in overtime, where he just tried to absolutely nuke it on, I believe, Donovan Mitchell's head, taking it to the basket. But overall, I felt like there was a weird acclimation period there. They kind of fell into that old habits. No other role players were hitting shots, and it was just a lot of Brunson. And then I do think this is going to be a tough matchup for Towns, just with how well Mobley and Allen hold up on the defensive end of the court. But ultimately, Bridges kind of figuring it out, and Brunson just being phenomenal down the stretch. I mean, just the individual excellence, 38 points. He was 15 of 29 shooting. So yeah, you called it out. Tons of shot attempts there, but they needed every one of them.
Yeah, I will say that on the OG Anunoby point, there was actually a point late in the 3rd or early in the 4th where I was like, do I even remember him doing any a thing in this game?
I remember him catching a couple nukes late in the shot clock and having to put up some awful threes, and that was it.
For a second, I like checked Twitter to see if he had like gone to the locker room or something, because I just genuinely was like, I don't remember anything he's done in this game to this point.
Totally, dude. I mean, and it was curious because it's like, is he really that important to unlocking the rest of the Knicks that much? Like when he's going, does that suddenly open up things for Bridges and Hart and even Towns sometimes? Because it just felt they were very one-dimensional. It felt like that rest that they had from the Philly series and the Cavs series going 7 games might have bit them in the ass a little bit. But again, huge credit to Brunson for just a massive fourth quarter. Bridges was really solid in this game on both ends.
Yeah.
A couple big steals that turned into layups the other way. And you called it out before, but like huge credit to Mike Brown, just working his way deep enough into the rotation to give, like, not acting like Landry Shamit's like an end of the bench guy, but he's not an every night like big time player. And the fact that he had
DMPs last year.
Exactly. And he has the opportunity to take the court. He goes 3 of 4 from the field, 3 of 3 from downtown, and a couple big shots that, like, again, you called it out, like the game tying shot and a sealer in overtime. So that never would have happened under Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah.
But I think that basically covers most of this series. I mean, just to put a bow on this, I mean, I felt the same way. I was honestly thinking like Knicks in 6. I feel like Knicks in 5 is probably a better bet now, just because this is one of those where the Knicks were shooting awful up until the fourth quarter. Towns was really disengaged. Like if the Cavs weren't able to steal this one on the road and put themselves in a situation, at least where the series is like maybe even headed back to Cleveland, which I guess they could still do, then I feel like the Cavs are basically cooked. So I think we're aligned there.
Yeah. I'll say this about the Cavs before we move on. I actually picked them to make the conference finals. That was more of a lack of belief in Detroit and what they have around Cade and offensively, and that very much came to fruition. But at the same time, like when I did my pick for that series on my pod, I said verbatim, like, I don't really want to pick either of these teams.
Yes.
And I ultimately do kind of feel like Cleveland, you know, we have these kind of fluky conference finals run teams in the past, like the Blazers in 2019, Hawks in 2021. Like it happens. I feel like this Cleveland team, when we look back, is going to be a lot closer to that than it will be to some like they're building off of this into next year. Because, I mean, look at the two teams they beat. In the first round, they beat a team whose second option was RJ Barrett, and they beat a team whose second option was Tobias Harris in the second round. Like, just the level of talent that they went up against offensively is just nowhere near what they're going to see in this series, or if, God forbid, they got to the finals. But, yeah, somebody from that side of the bracket had to make it, and, you know, I was going to be tempted to take Orlando to even beat them if they had gotten past Detroit.
I honestly, like, to give the Cavs some credit, I think you're right. Like when we zoom out and we're like, how did that team make a conference finals? Like they're definitely not going to be on the same level as other teams that we've seen in that spot. But at the same time, right now, I do feel like the Cavs are deserving of being here. I do feel like this is the best two teams in the East. It's not like I'm like, if my Celtics were on that side of the bracket or like Philly should be there. No, I think the Cavs took like a very ugly 7 games and then a blowout in game 7 to beat the Pistons. But it does feel like it's the right matchup. But as far as them not having the late game acumen, Mobley always leaving you wanting a little bit more on the offensive end of the court, and Harden stuff is just, it's out of control. Like it's just his style of play. Like the intensity or lack thereof, it doesn't translate. Like he's going to run into a couple games where he shoots the ball well and the calls go his way, like game 5 last series. Doesn't matter what uniform he's wearing. I'm not going to be buying it in the postseason.
Yeah. And the only chance that they have to win, or continue to win, is we know he's going to have like 2 stinker games, but he has to have only 2 instead of 4. You know, it's the series where he's good for 3 games, bad for 4, where they end up not having a chance, and the ones where they do squeak it out is like he had 5 good games, 2 bad games, because we know he's not going to have 7 good games. He doesn't have it in him at this point, even in his prime. I don't even know if he did. But the other thing is Mitchell's been a little the same. They've both been just very trick or treat, and like game to game you don't know what you're getting, and it's honestly a little bit the same with the big guys. So all of their top 4 guys are very talented, but on a night to night basis you just have no idea what you're getting out of any of them.
Yep. And like they got a huge boost from Strus at the end of that series against the Pistons. He was unbelievable and he struggled pretty bad tonight. I mean, Merrill gave them a real boost in game 7 and was pretty awesome for the most part tonight. You did call it out, that look that I was telling you about, that, you know, Mitchell deferred to Harden. Harden ended up throwing a pass to Merrill that ended up with a quality look. And even Mike Breen like stuttered for a second because he thought that was going down.
He half-banked. He hesitation
it was
banged.
halfway in, yeah. But anyways, yeah, it seems like the Cavs need some miracle stuff from their role players, and Atkinson was not pulling the right strings tonight. So I think we're good to move on to what we thought was going to be the main event tonight, and of course talking about Thunder versus Spurs. And I mean, this is one that I think all NBA fans have had dog-eared for a while. I was saying on my last podcast that like ever since my Celtics got bounced in round one, like I'm still watching everything, but I'm just like really all I care about is like watching Wemby and counting down the days to the Western Conference Finals. And it's just electric when the hype for a series like absolutely lives up to it, even surpasses it with the double overtime game we had in game one. So just to quickly set the scene before I get your thoughts on it, it was 122 to 115. The Spurs pulled it out. Again, double OT game. Fox is ruled out with an injury right before the game. For the Thunder, J-Dub is back in the starting lineup. Wemby, I said this last podcast, possibly the best game of his career, all things considered. I mean, 42 points, 24 rebounds, and 3 blocks in nearly 49 minutes. Dylan Harper was amazing. Caruso was the hero with 31 points for OKC. Tough game for SGA, but he stuck it out for a full 51 minutes. I mean, that was a masterclass. If we get even one more game that's even close to that, I think this series will still live up to the hype. But after watching a game like that, a game one Thunder Spurs, what was your biggest takeaway?
Well, it's hard not to lead with Wemby and just how ridiculous he was. It's funny because early in the game, obviously they started with like J-Dub on him. They threw Caruso. They were going smaller guys and ultimately putting the bigs elsewhere. My initial thought was like, man, I feel like he's not taking as much advantage as he should and just going in the paint and shooting over these guys. And I mean, with his size and what he can do in his length, like even just dunking over these guys. And I had written in my notes after LOL that I even thought this at any point in this game because he completely flipped it and did exactly that. And that's kind of been my one, like, I won't say gripe with Wemby, but like over the past few years, I felt like he's tried to be a perimeter oriented player that can attack in the paint. And I've always wanted him to be a dominant player in the paint that can shoot it on the perimeter, switch that mindset. And I feel like that was what made him take a pretty significant leap offensively this year because his 3-point volume is way down. He's living more in the paint. And I thought this game was a perfect encapsulation of that. And I mean, how many times did he just do this little turn dunk that you didn't even think was an option? And suddenly he's like posterizing some guy. And and the alley-oops that he, like Castle and Harper and Fox are able to throw to him where it's like literally no one else can even touch the ball. It's absurd. So none of that's even to mention just how insane his impact is on the defensive end. I mean, the Thunder have underratedly dominated the playoffs so far with their offense. Last year in the playoffs, defense was like the reason that they were so dominant and they were turning everybody over, blah, blah, blah. Like last year, they were 5th in offense for the whole playoffs with a 114 net rating. This year, they're first with 126 net rating going into game one. So, they were like kind of middle of the pack among the teams that won a series. And this year they were like blowing the competition out of the water offensively. And even their defense last year, 106 defensive rating was first. This year it's 109. So like their defense has even slipped a little bit. So the reason they looked so good and they were 8-0 was because their offense was clicking on all cylinders. So the fact that Wemby was able to, I won't say single-handedly, because, obviously Castle did a really good job on Shea. I even thought like Carter Bryant in the short stint he had bothered him with his length and size and stuff, especially for a rookie. But just the inability for them to get into the paint or, having to kind of rely more on the 3-point shot for a team that's, shot it pretty well in the postseason so far. But like historically, that's been one of their weaker spots, but just a lot of their role guys are kind of hit or miss. And even with the Caruso game of his absolute life, like it still wasn't enough to kind of make up for the clunkiness that they had offensively. So that, I mean, it's hard not for that to be the takeaway, but you go, and then I have one other thing I definitely want to get to. So
yeah, definitely. You're right on a lot of things. The first takeaway has to be Wemby. The bar continues to get raised by him each and every series. Like it was impressive against Portland, Minnesota, that team. Like I felt like that series against the Spurs was more about the Spurs just being awesome rather than it was Minnesota falling apart. Like, yes, Ant was less than 100%. They didn't have DiVincenzo, but that team was legit. What we saw against Denver was legit. And the Spurs just kicked their ass in basically every game that Wemby didn't get ejected besides game one, right? So I felt like that was pretty thorough. But like my biggest takeaway was like, holy shit, is this going to be the next decade in the NBA? Normally, I'm not that reactionary, but just watching how high level of a game of basketball that it was. And honestly, the Spurs were so good that they were in control for most of it. I mean, their lead only stretched as high as 10 points, but like the fact that they really grew up during that game because the Thunder came back. They never really had it going on besides Caruso. J-Dub was awesome in his return. That was probably the biggest silver lining for the Thunder was how great he looked in his return from injury. But the fact that the Spurs gave up that lead on the road, that place is going crazy. They were down a couple points, but the fact that they survived it at the end of regulation and then were down during the first overtime too and persevered all that, I was like, man, this team is legit. So Dylan Harper was phenomenal in this game, especially in the expanded role without De'Aaron Fox. He played 47 minutes, 24 points, 11 boards, 6 assists, and 7 steals. I think the other takeaway, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, was like, it was very modern basketball right away. Like nobody on the court is under 6'6" on like either team. And like the defense at Vassell and Champagnie and Harper. And then obviously we know everybody on OKC defends at an elite level. Like that was kind of like my takeaway was this is what the future of the game is going to look like. So I am curious, just to zoom out real quick, what was your pick for Spurs Thunder before this series? And same question I asked before, how does game 1 kind of impact where you think this thing is going to be headed?
Yeah, I had Thunder in 6. And to be honest, I would not change my pick based on that. You know, I did think San Antonio was going to get one of the first 2 games. And then I think OKC is probably going to get one of 3 or 4. We'll be tied 2-2. I thought OKC would win game 5 at home. And then in the closeout game, I thought they would take care of business. And the reason that I'm not going to overreact too much is because I know that Caruso was awesome. But outside of him, I mean, you could point to a million things that did not go their way. Shea's going to end up with a pretty good stat line at the end, but like watching that game, that was the worst game I had seen him play. I don't want to exaggerate and say like the whole season, but like it was certainly up there, at least for the postseason.
Definitely.
Like in terms of just his ineffectiveness offensively, he wasn't even able to really get shots off in the first half. I think he had like 4 points or something like that and wasn't getting to the free throw line, like any of that. It was just very uncharacteristic for him. Came on late, obviously, but it was kind of like they had just built this deficit and they were trying to come back for most of that period anyway, which made it more difficult. AJ Mitchell, 4 points. It's a guy that averaged 23 points per game in the last series and was playing like a legitimate number 2 option for them throughout this whole postseason. Like, do I think he's going to keep averaging 23 with J-Dub back? Probably not. But do I think he's going to continue to be a complete non-factor? I also don't think that's going to be the case. Chet Holmgren did his biggest Jalen Duren impression in this one. In terms of just like getting cardio out there and not really impacting the game very much. Obviously, he's still good defensively, but like 8 points and 8 rebounds in what did he play?
41 minutes. Yeah.
41 minutes. That's just not getting it done for a guy that's probably going to make All-NBA team, you know, made the All-Star team. People rave about this guy as a top 25 player in the league. Like they're going to need more out of him offensively. And then Hartenstein was just like unplayable for them. I don't know. That could just be like a permanent thing, but I'm just saying, I think they'll figure out those rotations a little bit more. So across the board, it was kind of like J-Dub played pretty well in the first half, a little quieter in the second half. So I felt like all this perfect storm for them kind of went wrong outside of Caruso. And they still went to double OT and probably would have won that game if Wemby doesn't hit one of the most ridiculous shots we've seen in a really long time. So I'm not going to move off the pick yet, but obviously game 2 is going to be telling if they can kind of switch some of those things around.
Definitely. And my pick was Spurs in 7. Sticking to that, I do feel like it's a crapshoot series. I think there's going to be hopefully several more games like this one. And it's going to be a chess match, but you called out a lot of things that I'm glad you touched on. It didn't necessarily feel like OKC was going through a really tough game because the Caruso thing was such an anomaly. I mean, the dude had 31 points on 8 of 14 shooting from 3. Hilarious that he, you know, if you told him before the game that, hey, man, you're going to shoot 14 threes tonight. Like, what would his reaction would have been? Like, obviously, San Antonio was very comfortable giving that up, and Caruso made him pay. But you're right. It was a horrible Shea game, you know, non-factor from Chet. Hartenstein, I mean, they pulled the plug on that so quickly. Like 2 minutes into the game, he was out for Caruso. Yeah, and then like he finished the game playing 12 minutes. It didn't even feel like that much in it. And again, a game that lasted like basically 60 minutes is kind of wild. Mm-hmm. And some other things that I just wanted to call out, you know, if you're making a pro Thunder defense here, like Luke Cornett, I mean, loved him when he was on the Celtics. He was fucking terrible last night.
Yeah,
he was like
bad.
Awful. He let Jared McCain like bounce him into the stanchion. He like went for a flop there. He like couldn't catch the ball a few times. Like, and it wasn't even just this series. He was largely unplayable in Minnesota. And I feel like that combination of like, we just played Wemby 50 minutes and like the backup center that was really solid for us in the regular season, like looks like a cone. Suddenly they're going to be thrust into like having like Carter Bryant plays small ball 5 with Keldon Johnson out there. And like, it just gets really scary when you look at the depth where like OKC has like 3 very legitimate big men at this point, because even bench Jalen Williams is way overqualified for the role that they play him in. So it's going to be a long series. So I think we're both right to not let this affect our disposition on the series heading into it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one other thing, I was a little lower on the Spurs coming into the postseason just because of the whole lack of experience thing. I think that stuff matters. Like 2 years ago when the Thunder were the number 1 seed, Dallas beats them in round 2. That was also a series I had circled as like well, let's see if the Thunder can actually get over this hump, even though they're going to be the favorite against a guy in Luka that's already made a conference finals and been a high-level playoff performer. Is J-Dub that number 2 option that they need? Do they have enough size, etc.? They did not answer the bell. So historically, I just kind of feel like these teams need to go through their growing pains, take the playoff lumps a little bit before they go on this big run. But I think they are such a weirdly poised and mature group beyond their years. And I think, to me, the big X factor has been Dylan Harper, in the sense of like 19, 20 years old, whatever he is, like coming in as a guard, especially. Like, just ask Scoot Henderson how hard it can be coming in as a rookie guard, let alone being like decent, but not being like a huge negative. Like, there's a lot of guards who end up being really good who struggle a ton early in their career, especially in high leverage moments like this. And so I thought that if Harper didn't translate in the way that they kind of needed him to, I felt like there also were going to kind of be a guy short. Like, just in terms of outside of Castle, Fox, and Wemby, it's a lot of just role players that are going to hit open shots, but do they have enough around them there? But Harper has, exceeded every sort of expectation you possibly could have had for him, and looks like a future star. And like his creativity finishing around the rim, the fact that he's like bully balling guys at this age and like looks like physically like a 6-7 year pro.
Chet Holmgren like 4 feet on like a drop step like yesterday. I was like, I couldn't believe. I know Chet's a twig, but I was like, come on, dude! Like the physics of that don't even make sense. And he scored. Like, anyway, sorry to cut you off.
I know, and he's been way better defensively than I would have thought too. He had 7 steals in this game, and like just looks up to the task and not scared of anything. But he's also like picks his spots in a really mature way, where when we do have guards that come in that like even like guys that have had impact as rookie, like Tyler Hero, for example, like on their finals run was a big boost for them. But again, he's more of a like microwave scorer, doesn't really know what else to do other than try to take a shot. And Harper is just like completely not that, like fits right into the offense, has this unique way of like reading when they kind of need him to get a little bit more aggressive, but is totally fine deferring and can play off ball around the other guards as well. So like he to me has been like the X factor for them, not only just in this game, but just like their entire run, and like beating Minnesota the way they did. Like, I don't think if he's having the contributions he is, that they'd even be like in this position, to be honest.
No shot. And I think this one was a fun win for like the league pass junkies and like the eye test FC or whatever people call themselves on Twitter these days, right? Like, because Harper was just so obvious when you watched him, like the poise and like the stuff in the regular season and like the finishes and transition, like to see it be like, no, buddy, like the lights are on now. You guys have a chance to win a championship now. Mm-hmm. By the way, De'Aaron Fox is out. You're playing the defending champs and you're in the starting lineup. You find out, maybe he found out earlier than we did. We found out 90 minutes before tip-off, like at the last possible second. And that wasn't even a storyline going in. Like, I kind of forgot that Fox sprained his ankle because that game.
He stayed in the game, so yeah.
Yeah, he stayed in the game, and like game 6 was so uncompetitive against Minnesota. Like, I was like, whatever. But I think it was an insane performance, and it just keeps stacking. He had some moments against Portland. He had a nice moment against Minnesota once Wemby got ejected, and here we are now. So with that question, obviously you're a Harper guy yourself. If you're Mitch Johnson, you have a decision to make at this point, right? Because like they have this weird logjam of a lack of size surrounding Wemby, but this 6'6" rookie clearly looked like your second best player last night. And so assuming De'Aaron Fox is healthy for game 2, what is your closing 5 for the San Antonio Spurs if you're Mitch Johnson?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to me, there's only 2 kind of locks or untouchables in that answer. Obviously, Wemby. And then I also think Castle just has to be in there mostly for what he does defensively and just gives them a little bit more size compared to the rest of those guys. Even if, 11 turnovers last night. And
I actually didn't notice that. That's insane. 11 you play for
11
an hour,
assists also. So,
perfect ratio. Look at that.
Yeah, still got the 1-to-1 ratio there. But I didn't feel like watching watching it that he had 11
No,
turnovers.
maybe I'm just a Spurs fanboy now, but shit, I really,
Yeah.
I didn't think it was 11. I was like,
Yeah.
yikes, that's crazy.
But no, I think the rim pressure he has on top of the defense and the shot, which is significantly improved, he's got to be in there. But I think anything else is fair game, and that even includes Fox. You know, I personally have felt through parts of this postseason that there has been times where Fox almost feels like a clunky fit for them, and like almost like the odd man out at times because the jump shot's not super consistent. You know, to be honest, when they swing the ball to him and he's wide open, I don't get a fuzzy feeling that he's going to make it more often than not. And I won't say he's a ball stopper because like he is like somewhat of a natural point guard, but I don't think defenses like are scared of him and react to him the same way that they do even with like Harper and Castle, which is crazy to say. I just feel like those guys as threats getting downhill, like I think Fox is a little bit more comfortable driving by a guy and then doing a little like floater or like a one-legged step back type shot. That's like, if you're defense, you're kind of going to live with that versus the other two dudes are just putting insane pressure on the rim. And it's not like Fox is making up for it with a more reliable jump shot than either than them. And to be honest, at this point, Castle kind of seems like the better shooter, which is crazy to say given where he was last year. So again, I think Fox is normally going to be in the closing five just because of his pedigree and reputation. But I'm more saying that he's not exempt from being benched late in the game, in my opinion, depending on the type of game he's having. But ultimately, you probably would ideally want all three of the guards out there, and then probably whoever's having the better game between Vassell and Champagnie in the fifth spot. But like I said, I mean, if Fox is having a stinker or Harper's looking more like a rookie, like as much as we're praising him, he has had some not great games in the postseason as well. So if one of those guys is struggling more, then maybe you roll with Champagnie and Vassell both out there to be scoring threats on the wing. But I don't think Mitch Johnson needs to answer that question until we're in the fourth quarter of a game and he can kind of use his discretion based on how the games went.
It's just going to be a decision that he has to make at the end of every game moving forward, right? I mean, that goes without saying, but that decision is continuously getting more difficult, like the more Harper shows, and just kind of the weird logjam that they have. But like, it is worth calling out Vassell. I thought was unbelievable last night. I mean, he only had 12 points. He didn't have that many shots, but like the block, like Chet gets an offensive rebound in one of the overtimes and like looks like it's going to be a wide open dunk, and Vassell just springs it and blocks the crap out of Chet, like so clean.
Yeah.
That was a massive play. Like Champagnie had some nice moments as well. Like those other guys do fill in really nicely on the Spurs, and they haven't gotten a lot of shine. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So a couple other things on this series, real quick, more of the radio hit segments, if you will. Is Wemby the best player in the world?
I'm not there yet. I'm
not there yet. Okay.
I'm
okay.
not yet. I'm a body of work guy. I couldn't possibly fathom putting somebody number one when they have not won an MVP, or not made a finals at any point. I also think like offensively, he is still like a clear step below the Sheas and the Jokic's of the world. And I know he's a clear step above defensively, but ultimately
Definitely.
like the NBA, good offense kind of does beat good defense in the NBA, and offense is just valued a little bit more. And that's just like the nature of the game. So I think he can get up to maybe their level just once he, refines the decision making a little bit, works on the jump shot even a little bit more, and is better at getting to his spots. I think that's kind of his biggest weakness offensively right now is like once he's in his spot, he's like nearly unbeatable. But like Shea just is like a master at like getting to his sweet spot, and he converts more often than not. And so Wemby still can kind of get pushed out of his spot a little bit more on the offensive end, but yeah, I'm not there yet. I think I've probably pushed him up to third, but I would have Jokic and Shea still ahead of him just because, I mean, if Shea back-to-back MVPs, if they do win this series and they win the finals again, like I just don't know how you could possibly not have him above Wemby at this point, and then Jokic still the body of work. I'm like, it's just too overwhelming, and he still eye test wise offensively like is just like a complete cheat code.
See, I'm glad you're going to be the yin to my yang here. I needed this balance. I needed a reasonable person I trust to like say those things into a microphone in front of me. That being said, I think I'm there just because like it's been on if you look at the body of work, I totally understand the resume thing's different, but just like gut feeling, if there's a game tomorrow and you can have anybody in the world, I feel like I'm just picking him because of the two-way stuff and the offensive leap that I've seen, especially over the last couple series. Now, I will say, what you called out earlier about like Wemby's shot diet at the very top of this segment here and how like you were like disappointed by it and like you need him getting closer to the hoop. I was amazed watching his shots back from last night how many of them were around the rim, how much he slaughtered them on the offensive glass. Every time that OKC went to this weird zone, they left him. They didn't have a body on him on a couple different cuts. He actually missed 2 different like layups in the game that should have been dunks. They were kind of crazy. One of them was like a minute left in overtime, and he was the only person in the paint on an offensive rebound. I'm like, how does that happen? So long story short, I think Mark Dagnall's a great coach. I think they have options. Maybe it's more Hartenstein. Maybe it's just more Check guarding him straight up. I don't know, but they will play better defense. They will not, like that shot chart of Wemby, I guarantee, will not have as many easy looks as what it did in game 1. So I could be reactionary here, but I just think the two-way stuff and the way that team is rallying around him, it's terrifying that in year 3 he's already there. But I think it's at least a conversation, right?
It is a conversation. And I'll say this, I am someone who tends to, like, I'd rather be late on a guy than early, just because I think there are a lot of players who get like prematurely and kind of falsely elevated into this. Like Amin Thompson, great example. Everyone's like obsessed with him a year or 2 ago. And I'm like, come on, guys. I'm like,
I think I could outshoot him in an open gym, guys.
Yeah.
Have you seen my tape? Have you seen my men's league tape? I don't know.
Exactly. I'm like, can the guy like have a repeatable move offensively in the half court before we're calling him a top 30 guy or something like that? Mobley's a great example too. People putting this guy in the top 15, and I'm like, has he meaningfully improved over the last 2 to 3 years? And sometimes that comes back to bite me. Like I do a top 100 rankings every offseason, and I had Cade like 25th in that range going into this year, which obviously is too low now. But I did the like, look, he's never won a playoff series. He's made the playoffs once. He's like a year removed from a 14-win team. And he's like turns the ball over like crazy, did it even more in the postseason. And ultimately, he's a one-time All-Star, one-time All-NBA guy. And like, again, the people who put him in the top 15 were correct. He is that level, but I could always just argue, he got better. So when I said it, he maybe not was there yet. So, but then conversely, it helps me sometimes. So yeah, and I know Wemby will get there. I have no doubt. Just given what we've seen out of him. But yeah, got to stack those accolades a little bit more.
Definitely. I like to think I used to be of that camp, but like I got the Wemby bug now. Maybe it's because I'm in Texas. I'm getting the aura from San Antonio's wafting my way. I'm not sure, dude, but I'm buying what he's selling. So either way, I think the best player in the world belt is definitely, up for grabs. We'll say depending on how this series plays out. But I think Shai's right in the mix. Obviously, Jokic as well, and Shai's got a couple of big games left in him in this series. So I'm not going to be naive and say that it's a done deal. But game 1 was encouraging. Other quick things in this series, this could spiral into a larger discussion, and I don't want to keep it too long on this, but just in general, like when I was watching the game last night and what I said from the top, my biggest takeaway of like, wow, these teams are far and away, in my opinion, the 2 best teams in the NBA. They feel like they're levitating above everybody else. On top of that, all their core guys are young. And not only that, they're also both in a pretty good position draft capital wise. So I was thinking this very well could just be the matchup that we see for the next decade in the NBA. Do you share that same mindset? And if so, do you think that that's necessarily good for the NBA?
Yeah, I think it's possible, but I'm not sitting here like, yep, that's going to be the conference finals every year for the next years. Like, because every single year we kind of do this. If you recall when the Nuggets won, people were like, could they rip off 2 or 3 here? Same with when the Celtics won. The Thunder, we were saying that. And even I was like, okay, the Thunder, I actually could see it. But what if they lose the series? And then we're like, damn, they didn't even get back to the finals. Like, there's just so much parity in the NBA across the board. We've obviously well-known 7 straight years with a different champion since the Warriors kind of got disassembled a bit with KD leaving. And gun to my head, which 2 teams are going to be the 2 best teams over the next 5 to 6 years? Obviously, these are the 2 teams to pick, but you never know what can happen, especially with like the new lottery system. Maybe there's a good team that has a weird injury, falls out of the playoffs, and then vaults up to the number 1 pick and adds that kind of player to a already kind of semi-contending core. Not to mention that injuries do happen. Like Wemby is frail and tall, and his body type, there's not a lot of examples of dudes playing into their 30s at a high level at that kind of build. And so like, he's probably, if I had to bet my life on it, like, is he going to have 6-7 straight super healthy in his prime years? Probably not. Like, I'm sure there's
Yeah.
going to be some injuries in there. And then the Thunder are getting really expensive really soon. And I know they've got all the flexibility in the world, but I'm just saying the Thunder, when they had KD, Harden, and Russ, we thought that team was going to rip off the same sort of, I won't say dynasty, but just like kind of success year over year over year. And then KD was hurt one year. Russ was hurt one year. They trade Harden, and all of a sudden it falls apart pretty quickly. So this has been a recurring theme. The Nuggets were saying, wow, their window might be closed. The Wolves were even saying, wow, their window might be closed. The Celtics people are having somewhat of the same conversation. Like, windows close quickly in the modern NBA. For the record, I don't even think all of those teams that's necessarily even true. So kind of like a non-answer, which is a cop-out.
No, I'm trying to get the clickbait out of you now. I'm just milking you for quick hits that we can turn into like an Instagram reel after this. But no, I think I appreciate the honesty, because I get what you're saying with that. I do think this is going to be the future of the Western Conference for the next few years, just because like you said, you have to pick two teams. These would obviously be the choices, but I think we've already seen it with the Nuggets and the Celtics and the new salary cap and how that forces teams to retool, make tough decisions. Like, would it even be that shocking if the Thunder move on from like a Jalen Williams, win or lose, just because like that's a max contract? Like even if he's awesome and like he was last night, they might be better off just building around Shea having more flexibility and then using some of the war chest of picks, right? But that being said, I do think that this is going to be a real rivalry, and I think it's great for the NBA. I think the Wemby Chet stuff, I think Chet's going to have some answers to him later in the series. The fact that these two teams are relatively close together in markets and they're two smaller market teams, like I just think that it is a great storyline for the NBA that we weren't robbed of this conference matchup.
Yeah, to answer that, is it good? I think it depends who you're asking. If you're like from a fan base perspective, it's a little depressing. If you're like, wow, like we have absolutely no shot to even like somewhat compete with these teams, especially after watching like game one as a prime example of like, if you're not on this level physically and lengthwise and athleticism and skill and coaching and everything, like you don't have a shot. But to your point, like some of the best years of the NBA, in my opinion, of like our era is like Cavs Warriors, 4 straight finals. Like that was awesome. Every single finals out, even though like some of them weren't super competitive, just the idea of like LeBron going up against his super team and them playing 4 consecutive years, like that, those are some of my favorite finals memories, much more so than like, okay, we've got Heat and Nuggets.
Yeah.
Just as an example, like with these one-off ones where it's like, these teams aren't all that special anyway. So like, I do think when we've got these repeated matchups and just super high level good teams year after year, do think that kind of fans maybe won't admit that that's what they want, but I think ultimately it is kind of what they want.
See, I'm just glad you didn't use Celtics Mavericks for that example right there. I would have had to kill
fits
you,
in
right?
there as well. But
it probably does. So it's like, fuck.
Suns Bucks as well, you know, too.
Yep.
So
that one does feel quite random in hindsight, right? I mean, it's crazy. Well, that's awesome. And well, one more quick thing. I keep saying one more, but just to give a little teaser. It could be a small thing, it could be a big picture thing, but what are you most excited to see as this Western Conference Finals play out? Is there one thing in particular you're going to be really focused in on that you're excited to see over the next couple games?
I don't have any like tiny specific things, but more macro level for the Thunder. Like, how do they adjust? They haven't really had to like adjust in a series over the last couple years. And so like, what is that adjustment? And I'm like, sure, Hartenstein's not going to start probably next game, and they'll probably try to match his minutes with Kornet. But like beyond that, like what is Daigneault going to scheme to try to get Shea looks in better, like more advantageous spots? Like I think one thing that I think that they could do to like get him in a groove a little bit more is try to play him off ball a little bit more, you know, get some off ball screens going to get him the ball in space and away from Wemby, instead of every time he's in the action, everyone's hyper focused on him with the ball in his hands, including Wemby, who's sitting back there staring him down, versus if you can get a little bit more off ball action with him, I think that could help out a little bit. But like, that's just one example. So I'm excited to see like game 2 is kind of a must win. Again, I'm not overreacting. They lost game 1 of the finals last year. They lost game 1 against the Nuggets last year. So we've seen them lose game 1s, and game 2, they blew out the other team in both of those series. So I'm personally expecting a big Thunder win, but like, what if that doesn't happen? And they really are up against the wall. Even if they win, what if it's really close and feels like a hard win? Like, I'm just interested to see how they handle that adversity, because they've been kind of overwhelming favorites for better part of 2 years now. I mean, 2 years ago when they lost, they were still the favorite in that Mavs series, but they've been such a juggernaut, and a team that like I watched in the first 2 rounds for them. Like I thought the Lakers like played pretty well. I even thought the Suns in game 3 and 4, like played pretty well. Like, they didn't play badly. It wasn't like those teams like completely shot the bed or anything. The Thunder just had that kind of feeling of inevitability about them that like the KD Warriors kind of had, where it's like, all right, you can hang around with us a little bit until the third quarter, but we're going to go on that 15-0 run at some point, and you're going to be out of it and look up at the scoreboard and be like, what the hell happened? And so the fact that like they went from that to like, oh my God, like they might have someone on their same level. I'm excited to just see how it plays out.
Totally. And I know those adjustments are coming from OKC. Like I said, I know they're going to have a better game plan for Wemby. So for me, I'm excited to see what the late game offense looks like for the Spurs in like a more traditional game where they're not in cruise control ahead. Like, is it going to be Fox? Like, who's going to be the closing five like we talked about before? Does it get a little clunkier? Is Wemby going to be creating more? Like, I just think that, when it gets to that more traditional half-court set versus half-court set, Shea's the MVP for a reason, right? It's his late game offense. Like, how do the Spurs answer that? And I think that's the way that the series can turn on them. So it'll be fun. I think we've covered this one inside and out, and obviously can't wait to get to the future games and see how this one goes. So Sean, before we let you go, we're rapidly approaching midnight on the East Coast, so we want to make this segment go relatively quick. But I did prepare a little menu of like playoff awards, right? They're either team superlatives or playoff superlatives, just because we've had a lot of teams eliminated, right? Some of those teams don't get a lot of love, and just some storylines that are going to go kind of forgotten about until at least the NBA finals are over. So if it's cool with you, we can kind of rip through this. We can each give our awards pick. Starting off with the biggest playoff riser for an individual player, who did you have?
The game tonight did not exactly help this guy's case, but I was going to go with Karl Anthony Towns because I thought that he was having the best postseason of his career and doing all of the little things that he has traditionally struggled with a lot. He's been a turnover machine, the dumb fouls, he's been a liability defensively. I think that Mike Brown's done a really good job of getting him involved in the offense in ways besides just scoring. They've been using him as sort of the offensive hub at the top of the key, running the offense through him in that way, which I think has gotten him more engaged on defense. The turnovers are down, the assists are way up. His shooting efficiency has just been ridiculous. I mean, coming into tonight, 59, 48, 90 splits. I think he is honestly the biggest reason that they have been so dominant to this point, and just like his evolution and being an impactful postseason player. But again, tough game for him tonight. So
hey, they won, so you're good.
Yeah, for sure. But I also I'll shout out Dylan Harper, but we already kind of talked about him. And then another one that I was very impressed with was Scotty Barnes. I know they lost, but I thought he was the best player in that series.
That was a fun one. I had Scotty Barnes on my list as well. There's really no wrong answer. Nice to have a nice little positive segment here. I had AJ Mitchell, and then he played like crap in game one, was basically invisible he was just invisible for 33 minutes against the Spurs last night. Most of that stuff was like opportunity with J-Dub out of the lineup. So my official answer is going to be Paolo. I think Paolo was really impressive in that series against the Pistons. I can't really fault him for how it ended in 7 games. And I think there's something there. I just think there's something there. It's a two-way stuff, and the shots look a little bit better when everything's a little tighter in the playoffs. So inverse note, biggest playoff dropper. I'd be shocked if we don't have the same guy here, but I'm going to kick it over to you.
I actually took a different route. Obviously, Jalen Duren is the easy answer, but that's too boring. Yes. So I'm going to go with old reliable for playoff dropper, and that would be Julius Randle, who was just atrocious in this postseason. He was very good in the postseason last year, but the previous seasons with the Knicks so bad across the board. Game 6 closeout, 3 points, 1 assist on 1 of 8 shooting, a minus 34 overall. In the series against the Spurs, he had 9 total assists to 18 turnovers, so a 1-to-2 assist to turnover ratio. Shot below 40% from 2-point range and only 19% from 3-point range as well. So, just completely abysmal. I actually thought it was so bad of a series that the Wolves, I almost don't think they could bring him back next year. Like, I genuinely think like he has to be moved, and that's how bad he was. Otherwise, they're just like gonna go nowhere. Yeah.
Weird quotes too, like weird quotes coming out from the Timberwolves, and a lot of people suggesting like it was
bad body language
thing.
Guy in general. Like, he's just bad vibes across the board.
I'm glad you called that out. I'm looking at the Timberwolves through rose-colored glasses because they beat the Nuggets, and I felt like the way that they went down overall
they didn't beat the Nuggets because Julius Randle.
No, they did not. And honestly, remember like game 1 against the Spurs, he looked like the X factor, even though he didn't have the most efficient game. It was just like they had no one to match up with him, right? Like
I picked the Wolves in that series, and one of my big reasons was like, who the hell's going to guard Randall? They don't have
Nobody.
they don't have anybody in their rotation from 6'8" to 7 foot. Like everybody's either 7'1" or bigger or 6'7" or smaller. And even the Keldon Johnson and Castle are 6'6". They're small 6'6". Like Randall is 6'9", 250. I thought that he was just going to be able to do work. And so that made it even worse, considering you should be the X factor. You should have mismatches on you continuously. And you still were like the worst player in the series.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's probably the correct answer if you don't want to go the Jalen Duren route. I also had James Harden. You want to talk about old reliable. I know they're still playing. I can't.
He had at least had some highs.
He had some highs. He had some
Randall's
highs.
Like they don't win that series without him. You know what I mean?
You're right.
Like
you're right. That
Game 5, I know Mitchell took over in OT, but like Harden was the guy. Like they ran offense through him, and like so. But I get it. I mean,
I'm being too critical of just like what and I've always been more of a Harden defender, I thought, but I'm just like the body language, like the turnovers, like when he turns it over at the top of the key, like it's a layup the other way. Like they're just they're such loud turnovers. And then my other niche answer was Donovan Clingan, just because my guy Rob Williams was the best center on the Blazers.
He was a dropper. I had one other honorable mention that you're not gonna like, but it was Jaylen Brown.
You know what? That's fair. I mean, the Twitch tour isn't doing anybody favors either. He should just be on the list for his extracurriculars lately. So I'm with you on that. Most impressive team in the playoffs. They can still be playing. They could be eliminated. But what team surpassed your expectations the most? Is it?
Well, if you ask it that way, it'd be a little different. I would say the Spurs surpassed my expectations the most, but I had most impressive team as the Knicks just because of what they've done, and it just completely dominated in the Eastern Conference. I think they had a plus 20 net rating or something like that through the first 2 rounds. Their 2 losses were by 1 point each. I think they have like 4 30-point wins at this point. I mean, the first round closeout game was like, I've never seen a game that lopsided in my entire life in the NBA. And then they basically nearly replicated it in the next round. And I think that they've just so clearly been like a turn the dial team in the postseason, which is actually, they were my pick before the playoffs to make the finals. And that was one of the reasons I thought a lot of the other teams in the East, like even like your Celtics, for example, I felt like they were like kind of maximized what they had in the regular season. And I wasn't sure if they had that dial, which ended up proving out correct. But the Knicks last year turned it up a little bit before running into buzzsaw in Indiana and just felt like a team of destiny there. But yeah, I've been super impressed with the Knicks, and I think they're the best team in the East by a wide margin at this point. But, I didn't think they would dominate like to this extent.
Totally agree. And look at that take. I had the same team down, and I had like italicized it in case I didn't want to say it if they lost tonight. But now they
I was going to say it either way. I was going to be like, it's a throwaway game 1.
I agree. I think it would be the Knicks. And if I had to pick a team that's already eliminated, I think I'd actually say the Lakers, just because they really showed me something in that series against the Rockets. And I know they got swept by the Thunder, but like, what are we talking about with no Luka? And a couple of those games, like they were all honestly close games at like for most of it. Like the Thunder would just flip a switch in the third quarter to start putting belt to ass.
Definitely.
Most disappointing team in the playoffs.
I had the Nuggets for this. They were, the Celtics were honorable mention. But the reason I did not pick Celtics, like I said, is because I was personally lower on them than most people were. I had them losing to the Knicks in the second round anyway. So for me, conversely, I had the Nuggets making the finals and winning the championship, which obviously was a terrible take. And
that was my take before the season, so I'm right there with you, dude.
Same. I almost flipped to the Thunder before the playoffs, but I was like, man, I feel like for take integrity purposes, I gotta, because my preseason pick was Nuggets Knicks, so I was like, the Knicks still feel pretty good. I was like, I'd be pissed if I get it right, and then I switched my picks, and then I stayed, but obviously,
exactly. I'm so take committed. We're in the same boat.
I know. I was already committed there. So yeah, bad take. But I think just given the circumstances of like Anthony Edwards goes down, DiVincenzo goes down. Like I know they didn't have Peyton Watson and Gordon was hurt towards the end, but like that's just like not a good enough excuse given how undermanned the Wolves were. And like they looked like a complete shell of themselves, and a team that was on a 12-game winning streak coming into the postseason, that was playing presumably their best basketball. And it wasn't even just that they lost. It was like if you watch the games, they just like looked like defeated and like pathetic by the end in a way that was just like bizarre, and what we haven't really seen out of Jokic team. Like even when they've lost in the past, they've always gone out swinging. Definitely. Like I know they got killed in Game 7 last year, but like they made Game 7 against the Thunder. Like that's super impressive. And this was actually the first series that they had lost before a Game 7 that Murray's been healthy in since the bubble. So that like they have been the team that's like, if those two are healthy, like it's going to go 7 and you better be able to beat them there or else you're not going to beat them. So I was wildly disappointed with them, obviously. And they have obviously some questions moving forward.
Totally. I agree. I had them as my pick before the season. Like I said, I did have them losing to San Antonio in round 2, but the fact that they lost to Minnesota in round 1, and like you said, the body language was different. The fact that it was 6 games, the fact that the Wolves were more beat up than them, you covered it. And the Celtics are right there behind them. I think they'd have to be number 2 on the list, but I think it's pretty obvious now that they weren't getting through the Knicks anyway. Yeah. So it makes me feel a little bit better as a Celtics fan. But if you had to pick a playoff team that needs to blow it up and rebuild, what team would you pick?
I was looking through this. I don't think there's any team that I would say needs to like blow it up, like trade like their top guys, but a team that I think I don't know if I believe in their core and that they're probably going to have to make somewhat of a big move before they can like get really where they want to be.
Yeah.
I had is the Rockets actually, because I just like,
interesting.
As more time goes on, Şengün and Thompson as 2 complete non-shooters, I just like, we watched the Spurs and the Thunder and all these super high perform, like the Knicks play 5 out essentially. It's like, and we saw how like the Pistons, their key issue was like 2 non-shooters on the court. Like, I just don't think that's a viable formula in today's NBA. Like I'm not saying they need to trade one of those guys right now. I think they're both good players, but is there a version of the Rockets that's like competing at a high level in the conference finals with those 2 on the team? I don't know if I could see that, just given like where the NBA is today. Like imagine them playing the Thunder or the Spurs in the playoffs right now. Like those guys would just be getting cooked and completely not guarded at all on offense. So that's why I picked them. But I mean, if VanVleet comes back next year, Reed Shepherd's good, they add another guy, like they certainly could still be like top 4 team and a pretty good team, but I just like don't see it for them like as like a true contender with this core.
The way Fred VanVleet is discussed post-injury is like he was like prime Chris Paul or something like that. Like I know I love Fred VanVleet. He's a great player. But like
I'm
gonna
defend him, you know?
Yeah.
What he brought was important. I know what you're saying, clearly, but I'm like,
evidently.
I'm just saying that like his specific skills are exactly what they needed. So it's not about how good he was. It was just like they don't have anybody else that could even half replicate what he did.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was like the patience ran thin when they like refused to address that. They're like, all right, we're just going to go with this Reed Shepherd guy. We've been yanking in and out of the lineup and rely on him in the playoffs. And the Durant stuff doesn't help. But I like that answer. I think that's kind of fascinating. I didn't have Houston down. Mine was a little bit more obvious, and it promised it's not mean-spirited as a Celtics fan, but I had Philly just because it's like, all right, you got over the hump. Embiid had his moment. He beat Boston. They deserve to beat us. Like, we were terrible in that series. Yeah. But that being said, like, not that there's anybody out there that thinks Philly's a real contender, but like, obviously they used up all the magic in the first round. They were a shell of themselves in round 2, and Embiid can't stay healthy. And the fact that the future is actually kind of bright with Maxey and Edgecombe, and like they have these 2 different timelines, Philly was my blow it up team.
That's fair.
Best coaching performance in the postseason.
Yeah, I had 2 that I considered here. Ultimately went with Mike Brown, which I've already kind of touched on him a lot, but I just think like it's so night and day, this team from Tibbs teams in the past, and like dipping into the bench a little bit more and instilling confidence in those guys, trying to not have Brunson hero ball be what you default to when you absolutely need the basket. And like, I think the reason OG Anunoby and Cat have been so effective is because they're letting them run the offense a little bit more and be more involved. And like Bridges has been inconsistent, but when he's been on, he's been super effective. And like all of those things are just things that Tibbs just would refuse to do, and he's such a creature of habit that it was pretty tough. But other guy I wanted to at least mention was JJ Redick. I thought he's been absolutely phenomenal, and like the fact that they won that series, and then like we said, like got swept, but like a competitive sweep given the circumstances. Like I think he's proven himself in the last 2 years to be like clearly one of the, I won't say like top tier, but like maybe the tier below the top tier among coaches.
Totally agree. I like the Mike Brown choice, especially after tonight. It was another great job from him. I had Redick written down just because I was looking at the eliminated team. So big win for podcasters. I don't know if we can still claim him as a podcaster when he's also an all-time college basketball player and many-year NBA pro, but I'm just saying, more podcasters need to look. I think we have enough of a sample size. That's just a fact now. If you had to pick one team that was eliminated in this postseason that won't be back in the postseason next year, who would it be? One playoff team that won't be back in the mix.
I'm going to pick my Phoenix Suns, very sadly. think they overperformed, and unless they make a Ja or Zion type gamble, which could also not pay off if they did. But ultimately, like I was pretty down on them after the postseason just because I think Booker has kind of looked like a shell of himself over the past year or so, and like maybe he was banged up, but like the advantage creation doesn't seem to be where it was 3 years ago. And I know they're asking a lot out of him just given the roster, but like even Cade didn't have a lot on his roster, but you can just see the difference. Like Cade's going to get his 32, 7, and 6 every night regardless. He might turn the ball over 8 times, but at least he's going to like enforce his will a little bit. And like Booker's just seems almost a little like too deferential at times in some of these moments. And I'm like, dude, like you're the only shot we have. So like we need more out of you there. But then I just like could not be more out on Jalen Green, which I was also out on him when they traded for him. So that's not like news or anything, but like, I don't think that's a good pairing. And unless they make major moves, then I don't see it with them.
Now I feel like this was a mean-spirited question because I also had your Suns. They were like kind of the low-hanging fruit for this. I wrote it down and then I was like looking through the teams and I'm like,
couldn't have went Raptors, man. Come on.
Yeah, I could have, but then I was like, the Raptors were kind of fun. Like they kind of showed me something in round 1 and like they're all these younger teams. Plus you guys are in the West. I mean, that's like the real truth too. It's just like the West probably still has more teams that are on like that. I mean, maybe you could say Charlotte and the other teams in the East that didn't ultimately make it in, but I'd say it's probably them unless Philly actually decides to blow it up. But what team that is already eliminated from this postseason is most likely to be a contender next season? So you can't pick any of the final 4 teams.
Yeah, I said the Celtics just because I do think there's moves to be made. I don't know where you stand on the Giannis front. It seems like most people are pretty anti. I personally think that would be a wise move for them. And
Okay.
I would, in a heartbeat, trade Jaylen Brown and 2 picks for Giannis. Like people act like Giannis is super old. He's like a year and a half older than Jaylen Brown.
Totally.
And makes like the same amount of money. So like that's not an issue either. So I just think that I like that fit with Tatum better than I like the Brown Tatum fit personally. And I think he brings a ton of size and defensive upside that the team hasn't had. I mean, outside of like Porzingis, but couldn't stay healthy, obviously. So like, I think that's interesting. I don't know if they're going to go that route, but even if they don't, they're obviously going to add a center. Like they're going to do something. And it's pretty hard to not pick an East team for this question just because like, it's going to be wide open, I mean, the Knicks obviously will be back. The Pacers, we'll see what Halliburton looks like. But like outside of those teams, like every other team is either clearly a sizable piece away from getting there or they're just like not a realistic contender. But I did have also Lakers as a sneaky answer as well.
I think if I had to pick a West team, you could say Denver, but I don't know, man. Denver has like an identity crisis right now where at least the Lakers, you could kind of piece it together if they bring Luka back and have some other stuff. But I actually had the Celtics as well, not to sound like a homer, but for all the reasons you said, right? I felt like I'm like, A, it has to be an East team. B, I just have like blind faith in Brad Stevens at this point. I'm like coming around on the Giannis stuff. If you had asked me at the end of the regular season, it would have been a hard no, and I knew the Jaylen Brown season was great, but I did know he's outperforming where he's normally been at. Like, I'm not totally buying into that's just how he is now. I am just a little worried about the Achilles stuff with Giannis and just how a player of that style of play is going to age. Like, obviously, he's a generational star, but I could be talked into it because now I'm just kind of finding out that the Celtics window is a lot shorter than we realize. So it's like, hey, if Giannis only lasts 2 more years, but you have prime Giannis for 2 more, I do think that probably makes our chances to win next year better. And that's really as much as you can guarantee in this NBA.
I'll also say like on the Bucks, Giannis gets hurt, their season's tanked. Like the Celtics just proved that like, I'm sure if you put a healthy Tatum next year in the Brown spot of this year, they're probably just as good, if like maybe even better. I mean, I think Tatum's a better player by a good amount, but like they've proven that like they could essentially just like lose one of those guys, Giannis being that guy if he was injured during the regular season, and they can still win 55 games. So like they really could treat it more of like a let's just make sure this guy's healthy come playoff time. And I know that's easier said than done for a lot of these players, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword for most teams because if they do that, then they're normally like not good enough to then they're the 7th seed and it's an uphill battle and they got to be in the play-in, whereas like the Celtics probably wouldn't have to do that. So just another kind of reason for it in my opinion. But
yeah, I think if you didn't pick the Celtics for this, I think you'd have to pick another East team. Like the Lakers would be in consideration, so would the Nuggets, but I'd probably even just go with the Pistons if they get like a second star around Cade would be another nice choice for what team.
Magic, maybe, if Billy Donovan comes in, adding another guard or something.
Now, you can watch out. And finally, maybe the most important, because we're all watching basketball every night. What commercial is the absolute worst that's been playing frequently during the playoffs where you're just diving at the remote to mute it?
Well, first off, I will say the regional ones with the election, and I'm just
Good
getting
point.
ripped with these, like,
That's a good point.
you're gonna get a real conservative with me, and I'm just like, dude, come on, we don't need to see this. And they're like back to back, like 3
Yeah, they're
consecutive
all
people.
in the
I just
same
like drive
block,
me
yeah.
absolutely nuts. I'm like, but if we're doing a national one, I don't know. I thought about this. I think the Knicks one is pretty annoying. The AT&T one. Sneaky one with, what is it? The John Starks is like, I got Alvarado here, and I'm like, I just don't need to. And then Cat's trying to eat a berry that's poisonous, and I'm like, the AT&T ones are always brutal. Like the Thunder one was AT&T, if you remember. That one was like the takes the cake of the Chet and Shea one, where they're like singing what a
Dude,
pro wants
that was
or whatever.
Bad.
I was
I
like,
think that might be like the sneaky sleeper agent that
I think it's
has
like the Woat commercial.
It's bad. And like that might be the reason people hate the Thunder. So it's not Lou Dort. It's not what the media wants you to think. It's all because of that commercial. But all right, those are good options. I think the one seed for this has to be the lemon pepper wings, like the
God,
freaking
yeah, that
wings.
is
Like
pretty
that's
bad,
bad because that one. And actually, they paid for Blake Griffin and Taylor Rooks to be in there just to have the most obnoxious
I kind of forgot about
audio
that
ever.
one. I don't know how I forgot about it, but yeah, that one is.
Yeah, you hear. I actually felt guilty like trying to do the voice for a second because it's so bad, and then
it's tough.
Honorable mention has to be the Bon Jovi State Farm with like the guy from Key and Peele who's been reduced to just like the guy that holds a guitar and like screams with Danny McBride. Again, A-list stars just way too many times or singing. It's the audio that really kills me.
I don't mind looking to Haley Steinfeld, so at least that's the.
Hey, there you go. There's
the
a silver
lining on that one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, dude, this has been a blast. I've kept you now past midnight East Coast time because I'm a terrible person.
Nah.
But thank you so much for coming on. I think this was a lot of fun. And of course, before we let you go, tell the people where they can find your awesome podcast.
Of course, the Sean Jones NBA Show is the name of the pod. I got it on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Definitely check it out if you have not. Pretty similar vibe to what Nick does on here. I think I tend to ramble a little bit more, so I know Nick likes to keep it short and sweet with his 45-ish minutes ones. I have a hard time staying under an hour and a half sometimes, but try to be thorough. It's part of the job, being comprehensive. So but yeah, check it out. I have Nick on every once in a while as well, so if you're into his, definitely give it a shot if you haven't.
Yeah, definitely recommend it. Sean and I in a ramble contest that would go like 9 rounds. It'd be special stuff. Us solo podcasters, it's tough out here. But definitely check it out, and we will talk to you guys next week. So that is going to do it for this episode of Words with Wallace. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Again, big thanks to Sean for staying up late and recording this with me. Definitely check out the Sean Jones NBA Show if you haven't already. Also, be sure to follow @Words with Wallace on everything, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, I've been saying it forever. We do have some social media content scheduled for this week, so definitely follow @Words with Wallace on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook for the old heads out there, and I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.